So forget everything you've heard. Look, you could go ahead and take that complex top 10 sneakers of the year for 2025 list, just throw it in the trash. And while you're there, matter of fact, you could go ahead and forget your own personal top 10 list because nobody cares, right? Nike, they just hit us with an announcement of Bombshell, which has kind of left many sneakerheads speechless, which they always do this towards the end of the year where they hit us with the top 10 most wanted styles via the Sneakers app, which they compile this data just based off simply the amount of entries for a particular release via the Nike Sneakers app. So we're gonna go ahead and run through the list. In my opinion, I feel like rather than going off people's personal taste, right? If we take a look at this list, I think it's more of a clear indicator just based off the fact that one, we're going off the most popular styles, and two, Nike does happen to be a leader when you talk about in the sneaker industry. So I feel like this is more of a clear indicator of some of the hottest releases of the year rather than just going off people's personal takes. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into the list. Once we get through the list, right, you guys may be surprised to see what comes in at number one. Then we're gonna go ahead and compare it to last year's list, see if we notice any trends. There are gonna be a lot of interesting talking points, so let's go ahead and jump right into things. Coming in at number 10, we got the Travis Scott Jumpman Jack Bright Cactus, which we originally saw this shoe drop back in April. And quick spoiler alert, this does happen to be the only Travis Scott release, which did make today's list, which when we compare things to last year, a Travis Scott drop actually topped last year's list. So things are already getting real interesting, right? Now coming in at number 9, we got the Kobe 6 Protro Cell, which this is a reimagining or a re-release of a pair of Kobe's, which he actually did rock during an All-Star game back in the day. I can't recall the exact particular year, but we did see these drop back in February, right? And this is actually gonna be one of 3 Kobe's which makes the list, right? Coming in at number 8, another pair of Kobe's, this time the Kobe 6 Dodgers, which we saw drop back in May. There was some soft launches, ahead of that drop, but let's just go ahead and say these dropped during the summertime, right? So that's a cool one. Next up, coming in here, where we at number 7, we got the Galaxy Foamposite, which this is a legendary drop, right? Nobody really ever thought these were gonna come back, which originally this shoe dropped back in 2012 when these originally dropped back in the day. This was a sneaker which made a lot of headlines. One, which I always remember, is that somebody went ahead and put up an ad to trade their Honda Civic or something for a pair, which is absolutely crazy, right? So these did drop. When did these release? We actually saw these drop February as well, right? So I'm guessing this was probably during NBA All-Star weekend or something like that. Crazy to imagine Nike brought these joints back out the vault. Now coming in here at number 6, which some of y'all may be a little bit shocked to see these so low on the list, but we got the Jordan 5 Black Metallic Reimagined, which we originally saw these drop top of the year, February to be specific. Last time we saw Jordan Brand bring these out the vault, 2016, but of course, as y'all know, this one was a reimagined pair, which did swap out the black laces for a standard pair of white laces, which also incorporates some storytelling elements and everything like that. Very popular release, one which kind of caught some people off guard earlier this year, one which kind of set the tone for Jordan retro releases here in 2025. Coming in here at number 5, we got the Jordan 12 Flu Game, which once again, also a re-release of a shoe, which last time Jordan Brand dropped these, 2016. These originally dropped back in 97, 98 during that NBA season. A legendary pair, one which is rich in storytelling. We actually saw these drop top of March. Now next up, coming in here at number 4, another Kobe, the last one to make the list. We got the Kobe 8 Protro What the Kobe, which again, a re-release of a classic pair of Kobe's. We saw these drop in April. Now coming in here at number 3, we got the Jordan 4 Black Cat, which is the 3rd time we've actually seen Nike drop this sneaker, which unlike the first 2 times, these ones flew immediately. These also did have the hype of dropping during Black Friday, but people go crazy for a good pair of black Jordan 4s, right? Nike Air on the back. There was a little controversy with the whole Squeakgate situation, but it wasn't enough to stop the people from coming out for this release right here. Now coming in, what could be left, right? At number 2, this may shock y'all, but we had the Nigel Sylvester Jordan 4 Brick by Bricks, which we originally saw drop during, what was that, the 2nd quarter? These actually dropped in March. Is that 1st quarter? Yeah, that's still 1st quarter. So there's been so much that was said about this one. This is the pair which made the complex top 10 sneakers of the year for 2025, as well as a lot of people's personals. We've seen Nigel kind of, make his rise throughout the sneaker game. And I felt like, undisputedly for a lot of people, this was the best shoe of the year, but surprisingly, not the most demanded shoe, which this one was actually beat out by a big surprise hit, the Jordan 11 Gamma, or I guess I shouldn't say a surprise because this is the pair which brought the people out. An annual holiday tradition, the big Jordan 11 drop. This time, they brought back the Gammas for the very first time, which we originally saw these drop back in 2012. So being the fact that this was the most demanded sneaker, I think it tells us a lot, when we talk about these lists, right? Because of course, us as sneakerheads, the people that follow all the big sneaker updates, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, social media, always discussing the hobby that we love, the sneaker game. But, for other people, just your average everyday folks, this was the shoe that brought out everybody, you know what I'm saying? So this one had a lot of commotion. People were outside trying to get their hands on these. They sold out via the Sneakerheads app. A whole lot of pairs flew. And this was a true testimony, right, of just how big the sneaker game is, right? There's always these big moments in the shoe game, which kind of wakes everybody up. And when you talk about this Jordan 11 Gamma drop, this was definitely one of those ones. So were y'all surprised to see this one as number one on the list, right? When we take a look at last year's list, right? Well, first, let's go ahead and do a little quick recap right here. So this is everything that we saw here, number 10 through number 1. And out of the list, right, pretty much what we're seeing right here is a lot of re-releases, which means nostalgia is a big factor when you talk about hype, the interest for a lot of these releases. Out of the entire top 10, I mean, technically the only brand new model here would happen to be the Jumpman Jack, which I think they did make their debut in 2024, but technically it's like a newer model, right? So big props to Trav for doing this thing with that one. Mention like we got all re-releases, and the only new colorway of a retro model that we see here featured on the list would happen to be the Brick by Bricks by Nigel. So salute to Nigel, Travis, huge years when you talk about Jordan brand, Nike collaborators, hats off to both of them guys. Now, when we compare this list to what we saw happening last year, it's almost like night and day, which tells me a lot about the trends of people and like kind of the way they were moving here as far as in the sneaker game, right? So as we take a look here at the top 10 from last year, you had the J Balvin joints on there. You had the Trophy Room 1s. You had them Futura SB Dunks. We got the Kobe Italian camo joints. The Jordan 4 military, or like they renamed them to the Industrial Blue. And then as we get into the top 5, you see a lot of Travis's, right? So we got the Elkins High 1 lows. We got the debut Cell, Dark Mocha, T-Rex, AKA Jumpman Jacks. We got the reimagined Bread 4s. You got the Dark Velvet Travis's, and then at number 1, the reverse Travis Scott Jordan 1 low. So right off the bat, we're gonna notice that based off last year and this year, no Travis Scott Jordan 1 lows made the list, which as far as retail drops, the only Travis Jordan 1 low that we saw drop this year did happen to be the Fragment joints, which unfortunately did not see a Sneakers app release, which remember, this top 10 list does happen to be compiled based off the amount of entries via the Sneakers app. So that's gonna exclude pairs like the Travis Scott Fragments, another pair which you guys might have forgot about. It's absent from the list, but we can't forget about the Undefeated 4s, which didn't actually happen to have an official Sneakers app release, if I'm not mistaken. I think those only dropped via raffle and the Undefeated website. But y'all correct me if I'm wrong on that, man. Those dropped, what was that, back in the summertime? So some pairs will be excluded from the list. Remember, this is only based off styles which officially dropped via the Sneakers app. But when you compare things from last year to this year, a lot more Kobe's, a lot less Travis Scott releases. Also, when you take a look back at last year's list, right? While you do have an SB Dunk, the Futura ones, SB Dunks, you know what I'm saying, especially the low, they've had a hell of a run, from like, say, I guess you could say 2018, just up until like last year, right? Super popular, but of course, we had the whole panda epidemic, which kind of spoiled things. You could also blame it on Nike for kind of just doing too much with the Dunk Low. Shockingly though, this year, no SB Dunks made the list, specifically the Dunk Low, which you could say some of this year's hottest drops recently. What did we get? The Narwhal joints, those went crazy. We also had, what were those SB Rodeos? Y'all remember those? And then the Uto Dunks as well, which I was shocked to see no dunks make the list. On top of that, when we compare things to last year, we talked about Travis, no dunks. But when you look at what we saw this year, right? I think one of the biggest indicators of the hype this year in the shoes, which really brought people out, would be nostalgia, right? I mean, we got the Kobe's, of course. People are going crazy for the Kobe's. He's basically been immortalized as a legend. And when we talk about the Kobe line, Nike has done everything in their power to, you know, bring as many releases as possible to the people. Some limited, others not. But Kobe, you could pretty much say he's the closest thing to what we'll see as what Jordan has done with his Jordan brand line. So yeah, heading into next year, I'm guessing we're gonna see a lot more Kobe's making that list, right? Now next, we gotta talk about nostalgia, because there are some interesting pairs, right? You got classic, like OG Jordans, like these black metallic 5s. Also the flu games, right? So this is a clear indicator that Jordan, what he did during his playing days, right? The shoes, the OG releases, that's a time, a bubble in time which can never be duplicated. And even still to this day, like still some of the most popular releases, right? But then you gotta bring in that nostalgia factor. And I'm not talking about nostalgia from like the 80s, 90s. I'm talking about that 2000s nostalgia, right? You see, for people that are like saying like their early 30s, late 20s, even their early 40s, right? They got a lot of nostalgia, you know, for a lot of these early 2000s releases. And I think right now with Jordan Brand bringing back so many of these releases time and time again, I feel like that's that era which, like, you know, people are really, you know, calling back to, right? And for those age groups which I mentioned, late 20s, early 40s, these are probably the people out here which are spending the most money, which is why I felt like a shoe like the Galaxy Foamposite happened to be such a big hit this year, right? For people in 2012, they might have grew up, you know, hearing about this shoe. They might have even missed out. Maybe they weren't able to get these. Remember how difficult it was to get your hands on these, the resale prices, the fact that I mentioned somebody was willing to trade your car for these, right? For people that remember this shoe coming up, the fact that Nike brought them back this year for the very first time, remember, I feel like that's one of the reasons which that release was so popular and it brought in such a demand, right? Who would have thought that a pair of Foamposites would make the list of some of the top 10 most wanted styles, right? Another pair, Black Cat 4s, right? Which originally dropped back in 2006. You might have had nostalgia, say like someone like myself, which I remember people rocking these back in high school. I remember my homeboy had a pair of these. And then you also got to bring in the Jordan 11 Gamma, which to me was not the most surprising, right? Just based off the headlines, the fact that people went crazy, that these are basically sold out everywhere. When you compare that to the Legend Blues, which dropped last year, it was like night and day, right? I didn't really expect to see it, but the people went absolutely crazy for these. And again, it's that nostalgia, but not the 80s, 90s. That 2000s nostalgia, which we originally saw these drop in 2012. So just like them Foamposites, right? This is a shoe which you probably rocked as a kid. It's maybe a shoe you had like in your early days and it made you want to come back out again for them. So when we talk about Jordan Brand and the re-releases, right? While the OGs are always going to be the classics, I feel like it's them shoes from like that decade, from like say like 2005 up until like 2015. All of those new releases, new retros that dropped during that time, or new shoes which they're bringing back now like 10, 15 years later, I think that's the pairs that people are most excited to see come back, right? They're not the OGs, which have been dropped time and time again, but the first time that we're seeing a lot of these shoes coming back. So I think heading into next year, we're gonna see Nike kind of jump more into that bag. And as we see coming up here in January, I think we got those Wolf Gray 5s, which will fall into that category again. So I think that's a trend that we're gonna start to notice moving forward. It's not necessarily so much about the OGs, which they're always gonna get their respect, but it's the new retros, the ones that people that are now in like the late 20s, early 40s, which they remember coming back for the very first time. So as we take a look back here at the top 10 list, I'm not even gonna lie, while the Gammas may be a big surprise for some people, the biggest surprise for me would probably happen to be this shoe right here. Where they at? This would probably be the biggest surprise for me, y'all. These joints right here, the flu games, right? Because again, it's an OG drop. When you talk about 12s, I wouldn't have guessed that this would have been one of the most demanded shoes of the year. I would have probably thought something like the White Cement 4s would have possibly made that list. There was maybe other OG Jordan retros, maybe like the Taxi 12s, but no, It was the flu games, which we know was a legendary performance. There's a lot of storytelling elements incorporated into this drop, but I could have thought of a couple of different other Jordan retros, like some of the ones I just mentioned, which would have been more demanded over this shoe. But I guess what we're looking at right here, a clear indicator that the fact that black Jordans seem to be some of the most popular drops, is it due to the durability? You know, the fact that, you know, a white pair like the cements, you know, could get messed up? Or is it the fact that Jordan brand overproduced shoes like that? And a shoe like the Flu Game 12 was a little more limited, which made it that more coveted. But then again, we're looking at the most demanded shoes, which would be the most entries via the sneakers app. So when you talk about a shoe like the Jordan 11 Gamma, there was rumors of like 1 million pairs of these. So I don't really know if that plays a factor into it, but we have noticed some very interesting trends. When you compare last year's list, a lot of hype, and it seems like this year, it's kind of more about the nostalgia, right? So that's my interpretation of the list. Again, you know, a lot of top 10 lists this year. I say throw them in the trash. This is a real clear indicator by the people of the most wanted, the most demanded styles, the most entries via the sneakers app. And if we're being all the way real about it, right? Well, first and foremost, jump in the comments. Let me know, out of all of these pairs, how many of the top 10 do you actually personally own? If we're gonna be all the way real, right? Well, you guys know, if you watch the channel, I'm not out here buying as much shoes as I did back in the day, but as far as this top 10 list, I'm gonna be real with y'all. I only picked up one of these joints right here, the black metallic 5s, which for me, I think that's kind of cool because it just like, I'm not out here trying to chase the drops, which are the most popular, right? For me, I'm more into the shoes which like, I don't really care about the hype, right? I guess I should say, like, the last pair of shoes, if we're being real, that I picked up were a pair of Adidas Superstars, right? So that just shows y'all where I'm at currently, right? For me, black metallics, they had a personal connection for me, which is why I had to pick them up. And again, it plays into the nostalgia again. So let me know how many pairs you picked. What do you think about the list? Were you surprised? And when you compare things from last year's list to this year's list, what trends do you notice? Which Nike, of course, they're gonna compile the data and they're gonna use this as they forecast the future, man. So drop your feedback down below. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. We're gonna get back to the regularly scheduled news updates, but in the meantime, you guys know the drill. Stay safe, stay blessed. JATV, I'll catch y'all next time. I'm out. Love.